Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the October 27th school committee meeting. Would you please rise and join me in a pledge of allegiance and a moment of silence for our troops in harm's way. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Prior to this open session, we had an executive session meeting. No votes were taken. May I have a motion, please, to seal the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, Tom?
Yeah.
Unanimous, 6-0. Please let the record reflect that all school committee members are present tonight. The emergency evacuation plan is we head over toward the new gym and the tennis courts. And the only other item I have on my chair's report is an update from our Rhode Island Association of School Committees chair meeting. They held a meeting with the commissioner and some of her staff to have an update on school reopening. That there was a lot discussed that isn't really relevant to Portsmouth, given where we were in the process. Really, the only thing that came up was that there has been no waiver from the Department of Education on testing requirements this year. So it sounds as if, you know, testing is full speed ahead for, at least right now, the districts in the state of Rhode Island. I do have to applaud the commissioner and our staff for making themselves available and communicating with the school committees. There were a lot of committees that had questions, and so they were able to get some direct time with the commissioner. But for Portsmouth, there wasn't a lot there to report. Moving on to subcommittees, health and wellness, Mr. Piero.
Thank you, Emily. And Health and Wellness had its first meeting of the year last Thursday, a little bit later than anticipated, just due to all the work that's happening around the district. And we did get updates from the schools and the organizations that are represented on the committee. And we did have a discussion at length about the attestation forms and just what disconnects we're seeing in the population and possible ways that we could try to make it a little simpler, but no actions were taken, but we are going to try to keep that discussion going. We did have a second read of our proposed health and wellness policy, which is continuation of our work from last academic year. And our next meeting is going to be on December 2nd at 4 p.m. via Zoom. There were no votes taken and nothing to bring before the committee.
Great, thank you very much. Policy subcommittee, Ms. McDade.
Thank you. We've met yesterday and discussed 5 different policies that are all listed in the business section of the agenda this evening. For 2 of those policies, well, actually, I'll go one at a time. The first policy, it's a policy that we had approved last January. We did not make any changes to it, and so that discussion simply moves forward. There was another policy where we decided to table discussion until pending the results of the election, and the other 3 policies were approved for submission during this meeting tonight for a second read.
Okay, thank you very much. Capital planning?
Okay, thank you, Madam
Chair.
Chairman. We had our latest capital planning subcommittee today, a meeting. And at the meeting, there were 4 major agenda topics. The first one was the discussion and action of allocation of remaining school safety capital funds. And we decided that we would be looking and allocating funds towards the bollards at the middle school and the high school, and some brick refinishing work and additional security cameras and other things in that regards, totaling $33,436. Then our second agenda topic was to discuss possible administration building projects. We have hired, as an example, the HR director, and there's discussion as far as allocation of into the various buildings of space and time, and what would be the best setup going forward for everybody for communications and so forth. So that was our second topic. We discussed next the stage 2 application, and we had previously had a discussion on targeting over the next 5 years, perhaps in the realm of a $10-12 million type of investment over the 5 years, and then having the reimbursement of at least 37%, 35, excuse me, or more. And various elements were looked at, that the need over the 5 years. Colliers and our superintendent has been discussing with Colliers, Studio Jade, and Mr. DeLauro, the various topics and what we can do in that regards. So we are discussing that, and we are going to be working on that and coming back with recommendations later as that develops. But the state of Rhode Island has been very positive to us, allowing us to really have a submission within the next several months for the best possible reimbursements that we can get. And last, we discussed capital planning, and we discussed various items that we could look forward to that we could possibly invest in, and overall in the campuses, such as furniture and other items. It was also mentioned as far as looking at a emergency generator at the middle school, and working on that as soon as possible. That the old one has basically seen better days, and we need to replace it as a factor going forward. So these were the main topics. We had really the one vote, which was on the safety capital spending of the $33,436. But the vote was unanimous, excuse me.
I have a question. And this is really, is Marianne on here?
Is
No, oh, yeah, she is on there.
Mrs. Carroll on here?
Yeah, she is. I see her. So subcommittee votes are indications of preference of the subcommittee.
Right.
My understanding is that it doesn't hold unless it's actually been approved by the full committee. But then with the capital spending, who actually determines that, Tom? Does that have to come before the full committee now?
I can double check with Attorney Carroll.
Marianne is
Yes,
nodding her head
yes.
up and down.
A subcommittee basically makes a recommendation to the full committee. So the fact that they voted for it, they need to now bring it in front of you with the recommendation of the subcommittee. The action is then taken by the full committee.
Right, so we really can't, the next meeting, we'd have to have that on the agenda
Okay.
if we wanted to move forward with that spending of the safety. So
Yep.
that was my first question. The second question is, in years past, we've done a special safety bond, or we've taken advantage of safety monies through the town. Do those still exist, or are those expired?
No, yet. So the answer is yes. So that is what we were meeting about. And we kind of rejuvenated the district safety committee, but last year it had fallen off places. So there is that figure that Mr. Shares read off is what is remaining in
Wow.
the school safety capital fund from last year.
So that's not coming out of our regular
Right.
capital budget, that's coming out of the school
Yep,
safety. fund.
correct.
So then, if that's already authorized spending, we probably don't have to vote on that.
It was certainly already authorized. I think one thing that has happened is kind of our priorities and where we wanted to spend the money shifted a little bit. So I definitely wanted to bring that forward before the capital subcommittee, but I can talk further with Attorney Carroll. And we're not looking to move forward with any of the work immediately anyway, so I can bring it
Okay.
to the next committee meeting.
Awesome. Other questions for any of the subcommittee reports? Good, okay. Now, very pleased that we have a recognition tonight. It's always wonderful to recognize students and staff. And so I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Kenworthy to start this process, but we have a couple of things here. So Dr. Kenworthy.
Thank you, Dr. Copeland. So Steve, if we're recognizing Coach Ochi, I see a Dawn Ochi there. I don't know if we would want definitely him unmuted. Steve Tresvant, if he's on as well.
He's on, I see him.
And Terry Corford.
Mr. Ochi, do you have a camera and can you unmute?
Yes,
Okay, awesome.
Great.
I think I'm here.
All right.
Yes, it's my wife's computer.
Okay.
No problem. Yeah, that's what we figured. So thanks for joining us tonight, Coach. So we certainly wanted to bring this forward for a full recognition. One of the unfortunate things of many when we went into full distance learning last year, if you recall, there was a complete cancellation, obviously, of spring athletics, but that also occurred right toward the end of our winter athletic season.
Yeah.
Correct.
And while all winter athletic teams were affected, our Portsmouth boys basketball team was enjoying one of the best seasons that they had in, I believe, almost a decade. So they did not get to have their full playoffs, but based on just how well the regular season had gone, Coach Ochi was named as the Interscholastic League Coach of the Year for boys basketball last year. So we want to recognize him tonight. I think Mr. Tresvant is on here as well, if he wanted to say a few words.
Certainly. Thank you so much. And I cannot thank Coach Ochi enough for everything that he's done for our students, for our district, and for our communities. He is an example, a tremendous example to our students. I've known Coach Ochi for a number of years, and I say the hallmark of a Coach Ochi coach team is the ability to overcome adversity. And that is something that he instills and teaches. And he really prepares our students for difficulties they're going to face in life. One of knowing Coach Ochi, he's gone through tremendously difficult times, and his waiver towards our students has never failed. And again, he has been an example to them and how you do that. And certainly overcoming adversity is something that we're all going through in 2020. And he is certainly somebody that we look to moving forward.
Great. So we do have a certificate here, Coach, from the Portsmouth School Department. We will send this your way, but I believe Terry Corford, our state representative, is also on. So she wanted to say a few words as well.
Yes, good evening. And I just wanted to offer my congratulations to Coach Ochi as well. I've come to know him over the last couple of years and just realized how much he gives to the boys and the team and beyond just the game. And so I just wanted to recognize him. So in other times we would do this differently, I'm sure. But Joe, I do have a citation for you from the State House, and I will be tracking you down at some point to give it to you in person. And I wanted to just add a couple of words and to thank you for your service to the boys in the town of Portsmouth.
Thank you, Terry.
You're welcome, Joe.
Coach Ochi, would you like to say a couple of words before we give you a boisterous round of applause here?
Well, I just overwhelmed. Thank you for all the accolades and everything. Thank you to Steve. Thank you, Terry, and to everyone in the room. I guess really, and you had mentioned it earlier, the only regret I have is I wish we would have gotten to finish. But it was a wonderful year, a great group of kids, and they were a pleasure to have this year.
Well,
Thank you, Coach.
thank you for everything you
And I did want to take a second to thank my staff. They were wonderful to work with, and they share in this as much as any of us, me or the students.
Yeah.
So,
We'll give a round of applause to the staff.
thank you.
So again, we wish you were here in person so that we could have the certificates and you could be honored at the State House. But know that we really value your contribution, and hopefully we'll have basketball this winter, but there's no word on that, right?
They are fully planning as of now, but we have not received the obviously final word at this point.
All right. Well, thank you again. Thank you, Rep. Cortfriend, for coming and making the presentation as well, and Mr. Tresvan. So
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
all right. Is there any public comments?
Couple of comments in the chat. I don't know if
I
you want
think
to check.
it's just a congratulations.
Yeah.
Not seeing any hands raised. All right. No public comment. What? No. Okay. So moving on to our PHS liaisons communication. I see both Iceland. You're going to have to tell me if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Iceland Sullivan and Ryden Pardudizela are both here tonight. So if Mr. Costa, if you could unmute both of them, we'll let one of them have the floor, whoever wants to go first.
R-E. See. There you go.
Yep. Can you
And
give us a
it's,
moment?
Iceland is A-I.
Iceland. Okay.
A-I-S. There she is right there.
Okay, hi everybody. I hope you're all well.
I rated.
Um, That's great. So in the school the past few weeks, there's been not a ton going on related to school events, but the student council I know is hoping to change that. But before I get into that, so on October 14th, the seniors took their SAT, and this upcoming Thursday, the juniors are taking their PSAT at the school. Later in November, the student council is hosting a blood drive on November 16th at St. John's Lodge. So what this means is that anybody who donates, if they go and donate and say they're from Portsmouth, will get credit for that, just as we do for any other blood drive. And throughout that week, we'll also be having something where you can go and donate at any Rhode Island blood center. And if you say you're from Portsmouth, it counts towards us. And we're bookending the week of November 16th with another blood drive at St. Barnabas.
Good.
And this week also is our Fall Spirit Week, which is partially why the blood drives are this week. And Ashton can speak more to that.
So because we couldn't have a Spirit Week this year due to COVID, we tried to come up with an event that we could use to kind of get our whole school united. So we named it Patriot Week. And we're just going to, throughout the school week, include some fun dress-up days to get everyone to kind of feel like we're all together. And also, we want to, we're trying to come up with a COVID-safe event to end off the week. Because I know everyone is missing Spirit Week, all of the students, because that's one of the best parts about high school is being able to do fun events all together. So we're trying to come up with something to end the week off, and it's the same week as the blood drive.
Great. Great. Any other things you'd like to add? I think we're good. All right. Thank you very much, ladies. We appreciate the report.
Thank you.
Any questions? Great. All right. Moving on to our superintendent's update. Dr. Kenworthy.
Thank you, Dr. Copeland. Good evening, everyone. So first up is I always like to just do a quick personnel update on any new additions or changes since our last school committee meeting on October 13th. So since that time, We have welcomed 2 additional staff members to the Portsmouth School District at Portsmouth Middle School, a clerical position, Catherine Buffaletti, and our district maintenance staff, Scott Medeiros. So again, I still have been trying to keep up even in COVID times of having a face-to-face, whether that is virtually or just a quick kind of socially distanced welcome to all new hires, welcome them aboard. But we always like to officially bring this before the committee as well. We also did have our first, different situations pop up based on people's circumstances. So we do have 2 resignations since the last school committee meeting. So Elena Greffin, a special education teacher at Melville School, and Brooke DeGidio, a speech language pathologist also at Melville. And we're already working to replace these positions, and we'll have people who will fill in 1-year only positions for the remainder of the school year. Okay. Next up, just some quick district updates. There's a lot of COVID information to share, as I'm sure people have seen, but non-COVID related as much as possible. We do like to focus on non-COVID related topics these days. So since the day after our last meeting on October 14th, myself, Mrs. Viveros, and Mr. Amaral did meet virtually with the Little Compton School Committee. So we had a great session, provided some updates, answered questions. Again, and I think right now, and based on meetings or presentations we've done, and after this meeting, we've answered all questions that are out there in the Little Compton community. So I know we continue to enjoy that relationship. As much as possible, there's a lot going on within our schools that they can still maintain. I know we heard the update from our student reps at the high school. I know all of our schools are continuing to have their PTO meetings and as much as they can do virtually. We've also had, since the last school committee, most of our open houses have taken place at this point now. And we have had to do those virtually. I know myself, Mrs. Verith, we've popped into as many of those as we can. In some cases, schools are splitting it up by grade level even. But they've all done a fantastic job putting together it's a great presentation for parents, and we've heard some positive feedback on it. Again, we're making the best of the situations that we can there. So COVID related topics, Steve, this is where I just wanted to share the dashboard. If you scroll down a little bit more toward the bottom, and we have our number of cases. So I shared this at our last meeting, and I think it was one of the last times that we were able to see all zeros across the board for us. We wanted to make sure that we had this ready to go. We know where we are with cases, in our state and still nationally at this point. So it is no surprise that we are starting to see cases pop up in the Portsmouth School District now as well. So we've tried to make sure that we are as prepared as possible. And it has been a busy week in this regard. So going back to beginning of last week, I did receive word from the Rhode Island Department of Health, and I have to say that you might hear different things out there so far of experiences that other districts have had with the Department of Health. So far, our experiences, once they have all the information that they need, our experiences have been positive there. So beginning of last week, they reached out to me to let me know that a couple of distance learning students had tested positive. We were able to confirm there was no contact from those students with any activities in our schools. And again, we were comfortable with the Department of Health moving forward with just working with the families. But by Thursday evening of last week, we did receive word of our first positive case in the district. It happened to be a high school student. And so we worked again in conjunction with the Rhode Island Department of Health there, and to set up their contact tracing, move forward with what we needed to do. Sunday, we had heard of, based on the information that we had, what was definitely enough information for me to be able to move forward on for suspected cases. But the Department of Health needed a little bit of time to kind of gather all the information there. So today we received confirmation on those cases at Melville being positive. And also, additionally, separate from those cases, we received word of a staff member at Melville who has unfortunately tested positive as well. So right now, where we sit tonight, if you will, is we have a total of 4 classrooms distance learning at Melville. 2 are connected to the first set of cases that popped up on Sunday, and 2 are connected to the case today. Totally, in the Department of Health is satisfied. These just happen, although they happen to both be at Melville, they are totally separate and isolated incidents. I do want to thank, so when the information came to us on Thursday night regarding the high school case, it was around 9 o'clock. And if you think back a few days, most of the nation was getting ready to watch the last of the presidential debates. And I thought that's what my night was going to be as well. But instead, myself, Mrs. Viveros, Dr. Colwell, and Mrs. Lynn Alvarez, our school nursing coordinator, who is our main contact on the nursing side of the Department of Health. And I can't thank those individuals enough. We spent several hours on Thursday night sorting through the situation, in this case with Mr. Amrell, and working with the Department of Health. Even after hours, we have contacts that we can utilize with the Department of Health. Sunday, again, I thought I was settling in for an afternoon of watching football, and during that, we received word of the first situation at Melville. So again, myself, Mrs. Viveros, Dr. Colwell, Mrs. Alvarez, and in this case, Principal Laurie from Melville spent several hours on Sunday sorting through that situation. And then today, we were down at Melville again to make sure we kind of wrapped up what we needed to with that situation, and then the latest. So in any event, I did send out a communication this afternoon. We do have to wait for confirmation on these situations from the Department of Health. It's very important. We don't, sometimes it looks like a situation is going to go a certain way, but we do need that confirmation from the Department of Health. So I was able to send out an update today with a link to our COVID dashboard, which will just continue at this point to stay updated. And I just wanted to also use this opportunity. I'll communicate this out further in my weekly update, but if there are 3 key lessons I think that we've taken away from these first few cases that we had, the first is, again, I just have to stress to everybody to just be a little patient as we're working through these situations. Let us do what we need to with the Department of Health. Once they have everything they need, again, our lines of communication have been very good with them. And while they have to work on their timeline, and they are certainly probably starting to get very overwhelmed with the number of cases they're dealing with, they do a thorough job going through what they need to do. So we need to just trust them and allow the situation to unfold with the Rhode Island Department of Health. Secondly, we've been communicating this out, but I think certainly based on all of these situations, we just cannot stress enough. We will continue to do so. Anyone connected to a situation on a school case, we has to use the K-12 testing sites that are now set up. So I think through no direct fault of anybody, if people are going through their own doctor or their pediatricians for students, those results do not get to the Rhode Island Department of Health as quickly as they will through one of the K-12 testing sites. So we're hearing very good feedback on people's experience with those sites. So far, the worst part seems to be you do have to call to make a reservation, or I think you can do one online as well. So if you call, there's a little bit of wait on hold, but everything that we've heard from people going to the sites, and then definitely so far, I have not heard of anybody taking longer than 48 hours right now getting results. That is not necessarily the case if you go through another method. So again, we just have to continue to stress that anybody on the school department side, students or staff, we have to try to use those K-12 testing sites as much as possible. And the third thing, it's probably a few other things we could discuss here, but the third thing that I'll just take the opportunity to stress is again, we cannot enough just encourage people to that daily self-attestation process that we have We just have to take that seriously and make, certainly make sure that we're doing it. I think we're getting to a better place. We, probably at the high school, that's where we're seeing still the largest percentage of, those attestation forms not being filled out. We do have to follow up from there. The, students do have to get a wellness check. So it does really create some difficulty. Right now the high school seems to be the school that's dealing with that the most, but again, if you look at the questions that form is asking, and if you take the process seriously, and we've worked out as much as we can at this point, doing it through Aspen allows us to be able to get kind of immediate results on who's doing it and being able to follow up. And we'll continue to work with Aspen to kind of make changes and make that as streamlined as possible. But we need everybody to do that process daily and to really think about the questions that you're answering when you attest to that form. And I will leave it at that. I guess again, there's a lot to update there.
Okay. Questions. So one question that's come up sort of in the community that I've heard is they say, okay, classrooms have been shut at Melville, let's say hypothetically.
Move to distance learning.
Right.
Yes.
But I mean, I think it's important to sort of tell the community that doesn't mean that those classrooms will remain shut.
Right.
What is the procedure or the protocol for reopening those classrooms?
Sure.
How does it work now that we've had a case or we've had, these
Yep.
instances?
Sure. So for instance, when we had the case the information came to us late Thursday night last week on the high school student. One of the things that worked to our advantage there was that student in that cohort of students was not scheduled to be in school on Friday. So we knew right there that we could kind of take that out of the equation. We did follow up with a few individual staff members who we asked to work from home that day, but people probably didn't see a lot of the communication in that case that happened behind the scenes. The situation, so starting with the first Melville situation on Sunday again, which we felt we had enough credible information to move forward on, but we just needed to wait for that confirmation from the Department of Health. Again, we moved those classrooms to distance learning out of an abundance of caution because we knew that the Department of Health was going to have to do their contact tracing process. I do think by tomorrow, we're going to be able to communicate more information on that out to families in that situation. So by tomorrow, again, it should just be the case that popped up today. Again, they do need, what we're finding is they do need a few days to go through.
So can I just stop you right there?
Sure.
So you're basically saying if a case is identified in a classroom, it will move to distance learning for at least a few days for the Department of Health to do the contact tracing. And I'm assuming you would do a deep and thorough cleaning in the classroom.
Right.
And then
Which is-
after they do the contact tracing, does it open up again? Does everybody have to
Yep.
quarantine for 2 weeks?
Once-
What's going to happen?
Yeah, Wednesday. So we, again, the three different cases of situation we had so far, so the high school one is completely complete at this point. So when that one wrapped up, I get a list, I communicate out to the school. And so we know who is identified through that process as the close contacts. Now, one of the
close
things,
contacts have to quarantine for
yes,
14
the
days.
close contacts continue.
Okay.
But
We receive a list.
yep. And so the same thing will happen from these two Melville situations. As soon as we get that list, we'll bring the rest of the students back.
And then if it's the teacher that has to quarantine for 14 days,
Mhm.
you'll have a substitute, one of our permanent substitutes in there, or there will be another teacher in that classroom
Right.
to help while the teacher's either doing distance learning or will be the sub for that week or two.
Correct.
Okay. So I think that's probably hopefully helpful for everybody to know that it doesn't mean these classrooms are going to be closed permanently, but like you said, you do have to give RIDOT a chance to do their work.
And we're finding, again, it's been, once they have all the information that they need, we're finding, about 2 days on average for them to complete that contact tracing. They actually do They'll do interviews with the families. They gather a lot of information from us, and then do have follow-up sometimes for individuals on the school side as well. So
Good. Okay, and again, I know the grapevine in the community is faster than the Department of Health, but the schools cannot put any information on the COVID dashboard until it's confirmed by the Department of Health. And so it's not an issue of not being transparent. I applaud the leadership of the district and the principals that, the commitment to saying as soon as we know and it's confirmed, it's going to go up on the dashboard, you'll have full information. It's just they can't get ahead of the Department of Health, correct?
correct.
And that everybody should use the K-12 site because that's a very, very fast turnaround. Otherwise, you might be out later. And we have a very nice comment that says Portsmouth School District is doing a really great job in managing and communicating. And I think I would applaud that to all of the staff here too. So I don't see anything else. Okay. Any other updates? No? All right. Moving on to teaching and learning, Assistant Superintendent Rivera.
Always nice when we can discuss teaching.
Yes, teaching and learning is better than illnesses, right?
All right. Excellent. Thank you. And good evening, everyone. During tonight's presentation, I'm going to be reviewing our STAR beginning of the
I
year.
never do this, but I actually have the Department of Health calling me
Go.
now, so I'm going
Go,
to step
go.
outside. Thank you.
Certainly. I'll be just giving you an overview of our STAR assessment data, reviewing the beginning of the year pieces, which is hot off the press. We tested up until October 21st. And then I'm going to be making some comparisons using some of last year's data and discussing our district's next steps. So before we, perfect. Yep, awesome. All right, so before we look at our data, I wanted to give you an overview of the STAR assessment. As a district, we've been using the STAR assessment as our universal screener for the past 6 years. The assessment gives it's given 3 times a year in the areas of reading and mathematics, and the data is used for us to be able to develop comprehensive interventions for our students. The assessments are adaptive and computer-based, and the assessments take on average about 20 minutes for the students to complete. And again, we take all of the information that we receive from our STAR assessments, and we use that to develop our academic interventions. All right, so I'm going to begin with an overview of last year's data. As we all know, last year was filled with many obstacles, one of them being that we had an extremely difficult time being able to assess our students at the end of the year. At that time, STAR assessment hadn't come up with proper distance learning administration protocols. So because of this and the level of stress on our families and teachers, as a district, we made a decision not to have the students take the assessment. So the data on this particular slide and the next slide highlights the changes from our fall to winter data. There were some substantial improvements, as you can see at Melville, with a 20% increase of students performing at or above grade level. Hathaway not far behind with a 17% increase. And again, this is in the area of reading. Our middle school with an 8% increase, and the high school maintaining a 42% of students that are at or above proficient. So if you take a look at our fall and our winter, you'll see that there were certainly those increases throughout. In the next slide, we have our change in proficiency in math from fall 2019 again to winter 2020 for all of our schools. So as you can see, there's a noted increase, 16% at Melville, 17% at Hathaway, 7% at the middle school. There was a slight slide at our high school with a decrease of 6%, putting our overall district proficiency at an increase of 8% in the area of math. And again, this was last year's fall and winter. So as we move on to the following sets of data points, we're going to be navigating throughout all of the schools. So STAR assessments break students up into 4 specific categories: at or above on benchmark, are on watch, which are students that we're keeping a close eye on because they have the potential of sliding into intervention if not given additional attention. And then we have our intervention category, which are the students in need of our tier 2 interventions. And those are classroom-based interventions. And then we have our urgent intervention. The goal is to have less than 5% of our student population in this category. So that's something that we're always looking at.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Does urgent intervention mean you're a grade level behind?
So urgent intervention means that you're requiring more than just additional classroom support that we typically have our classroom interventionists come in and support those students in smaller groups. So it's more specialized, and it's not so much to say that the student is a complete year behind. What it's saying is that there are sections of some of the assessment that the students struggle most in. So we really take a comprehensive look at that and then develop specific interventions on those points. So again, looking at that for Melville, in the area of reading, we are at or above proficient, 57.4% of our students, 23.7% of our students in the area of reading at Melville are on watch, 7.6% are in our classroom intervention range, and then 11.2% of students right now are identified as urgent intervention at Melville in the area of reading. And this is certainly a great area of concern because we, again, want to see that below 5%. In the area of mathematics, 57.5% of our students are at or above proficient, 27.4% are in that on watch category, 10.4% in our intervention, and then 4.6% in urgent intervention. So looking at these 2 data points, we're seeing that certainly at Melville, there is a greater need in the area of reading and urgent intervention. Now we move on to Hathaway, and again, a bit of a similar story. At Hathaway in the area of reading, we have 48.1% of our students at or above proficiency, 30.9% on watch, 9% in that classroom intervention, and then we're at 12% of students who are in our urgent intervention. And again, we'd like to see that below 5%. So we're going to be having some conversations of how to further support all of those students. In the area of mathematics, 55.8% of our Hathaway students are at or above proficient, 33.7% on watch. Our classroom interventions are at 6.7%, and our urgent interventions in the area of mathematics, 3.8%. Moving on to the middle school. And again, these 4 slides are very similar, but I just wanted to be able to highlight each of the schools one at a time. So at our middle school in the area of reading, 49% of our students at or above benchmark. We've got 35.9% on watch, 9.2% in our classroom intervention, and 6% urgent intervention. So again, just slightly above that. But again, we want to see that below 5%. In the area of mathematics, 51.6% of our students at or above proficient, 33.9% on watch. We've got 10.3% in our classroom interventions and 4.3% in our urgent intervention. As we head into the high school, in the area of reading at the high school, and at the high school, I just wanted to note that we are currently only assessing our 9th and 10th grade students at the high school using the STAR assessment. So we've got 38.6% at or above proficiency in reading, 43.5 are on our on watch category, 13.3 in intervention, 4.6 requiring that urgent intervention in reading. In the area of mathematics, 64.8% of our students at or above proficient, so we like to see that. On watch, we've got 25.6%. with 6.2 in our classroom intervention and 3.4 urgent intervention. So as we take all of those data points, the next two slides, actually, no, I'm going to go back. All right. So overall, when we're looking at all of our districts, we are at 46.9% of our students in the area of reading that are at or above proficiency, 35.5 on watch, 10.1 in intervention. And again, overall, our greatest area of need that we are seeing is in the area of reading. We have an overall district urgent intervention of 7.4, and that's higher than we've had in quite a few years. In the area of math, 56.6% of our students are at or above proficiency with 30.9 on watch, 8.6 in our classroom interventions, and just below that 5% mark at 4% for urgent intervention in the area of math. Great, so the next two slides, as I was saying, they're going to provide a comparison of our fall 2019 data and then our fall 2020. And we really wanted to take a look at that because we know that our spring was difficult. And we want to be able to compare where did we start at the start of last year and now where are we at the start of this year and how are we comparing? So as you can see here in reading, there isn't much of a difference from where we started in 2019 and where we started in 2020, with only a difference of a few percentage points between schools as a district. Now, when you take a look at math, our math data points are telling a different story. There was a noted decrease at each school from where we started in the fall in 2019 and the fall 2020, with an overall district decrease at where we started of students that were at or above proficiency of 8%. So taking all of this information, and again, we are just starting to, as a district team and as school teams, to start to look at the data and develop some goals. The next slide just provides you with just an overview of our next steps. So as our first district MTSS multi-tiered system of supports meeting that we're going to be having to discuss the results is coming up in just a few weeks. At that meeting, we have conversations, particular conversations of each school, and then we have conversations at the district level. And we develop some short-term goals that support our schools and take us to the next testing period. Our school academic target teams are meeting to discuss students who have fallen into our classroom intervention and urgent intervention categories. And we're developing what we call RTI, response to intervention plans for those students. We're meeting regularly with the teachers and the interventionists that are supporting the students. Schools are also working on developing a list of full distance learning and hybrid students who are struggling and could possibly benefit for returning to full in-person. So that's some work that we're also doing. And as we bring all of this together at next month's teaching and learning presentation, I'm going to be really diving into MTSS and the work that all of the schools are doing. And I'll be sharing some of the goals that we're looking to develop for each of the schools to support this. And that was that. Any questions?
Cool. Mr. Bayero.
Connie, you can go first.
Okay, Ms. McDade.
All right. I just have a question about the circumstances for the testing. Was everyone in person in school when they took this test?
No, so
No. Okay.
so STAR Assessment actually did come out with some protocol of how to be able to assess our students, and our interventionists really just went above and beyond with this, and they worked collaboratively with our families. We also have some technology features. One of them is called Land School, where we can monitor the screen and the work that the students are doing. So we were able to assess them. Now, I think that looking at that fall assessment data, I'm feeling confident that it's pretty accurate.
Okay.
But we'll see what the winter brings us.
Would you say that most of the kids were taking it from home?
I would say most of the students took the assessment here.
here.
Yeah,
But
just our
some-
distance learners.
Sure.
Yeah. So if they're in hybrid, we had them take the assessment here in school.
Okay, okay.
Any other?
Uh,
Fair?
Just when is winter testing?
So winter testing will occur in January.
Okay, and then the second question I have is, given this is not, information hasn't been completely sussed out yet, but are we, when it comes to data points, are we testing all the same Melville kids? Or are we transitioning the information from like fourth graders to fifth graders to the middle school?
So, I'm sorry, I'm not sure
So let's say, for instance, you have data points on a fourth grader. Obviously, it should be in the middle school now. Have we transitioned that data to the middle
So
school?
the data that you're looking at would be that cohort of students that are there at the middle school, that fall data already includes them.
Okay,
But I think your question.
my question is,
no.
so I was gonna take that as a no answer, but
Yeah.
Right.
So if in fall night 2019, you were at Hathaway, but in fall 2020, you're at the middle
PMS.
school, you don't transition
Right, we're
that
not,
data.
yeah,
So you're
we're not
just-
transitioning the cohorts.
your data
You're
point is
not-
just all
Right,
contained in
right.
the same building.
Yep.
You're not comparing the
Yeah.
same group
Right.
of kids, you're
Exactly.
comparing the kids.
Overall.
Unlike RICAS, where we actually have that growth data and we're comparing it.
Gotcha.
Right.
Mr. Vadney?
I have a couple questions. Are we testing the special education students in these grades?
We are, unless for some reason their IEPs have them testing, like having an alternate test, then we are not testing them. But for the most part, yes, we're testing all of our
Now,
students.
do we see any differences between the special education students and the general education with regards to adapting to the distance learning through these tests?
Yeah, and maybe Lisa, you can even support me with that as well. But I would say that the students, we have a few different cohorts of students that require special needs. And our co-taught students are in the classroom, they're blended with all of the other students, and they're adapting to taking the assessment, whether it's done at home because they're distance learning or not. I think that we have a cohort of those students that we're considering. Some of the students are a vulnerable population, and some of them may or may not take this assessment because of guidance that's been given through their IEP. But those students, do you feel, Lisa, that they are pretty much, they're taking the assessments and?
Yeah, I would say generally they are taking the assessments. As far as the distance learning piece, goes, I think that, there are some close correlations to some kids who are struggling from a general ed perspective and a special ed perspective, but they all have participated in STAR, and if that has been given through distance learning, we're not going to be able to know if we can hypothesize that they may have done better if they were in person, but I don't know that we can make that statement with saying it in fully factual. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I would say that once we start to have conversations at that first data meeting that we're having in a few weeks, we'll start to look at those cohorts of students, and they too would receive the additional support that they may need to
That's
be
right.
able to close that achievement gap. And sometimes we even work collaboratively where we have the special educator and the interventionist working with the students. So, yeah.
I think it's important to note that even if students have an IEP, to Mrs. Riveros' point, even if they have an IEP, they're also going to be eligible for intervention. And then the other last part I would say is there is a very small population of students who may have not participated in STAR, very small.
Very small.
I have another question.
Cheers.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
All right. I would like to know, can we say now or the evaluation, or can we say at Christmas? Is there any kind of conclusion? Are we working on it? The distance learning, we're getting similar results, we're getting better results, or we're getting lesser results? And can we quantify, if there is such a situation, that we can for socialization and the other bondings or not? Because I still go back to with this whole issue of how we've been going to where it has to be distance learning, then it's a hybrid. Now there's some talk about maybe going back to distance learning. I'd like it to be set on an educational level, if we know, if it's a possibility, that it, and with our system, which I think is one, if not the best in the state of Rhode Island, I'm biased, but can we accomplish this with the task, or can we admit, if we can, that is better to have the kids back at school? I would like to at least hear that of what people really think, even with how good we are, because we're one of the top systems in the state. So if we are having the trouble and really can't do it, then I think that it should be noted to the state and to our kids with the education for the future. So that's where I'm coming with this stuff.
Yep, so Mr. Shears, I know that we had a conversation about the possibility of looking at our distance learners, and I didn't have time to be able to put that together. My hope is that for next month's presentation, when we're starting to go through all of this information, one of the areas I'm going to have our schools look at is to take their distance learning students and their in-person students, and for us to be able to see where we landed at an above, at or above proficiency for that cohort of students, and then for our in-person students. So I'm hoping to have that information for you at the next meeting. Yes.
Ms. McDade?
So I have a question, but first I want to make a comment in response to what you were just asking, Ellen. And I'll just say, I'm not speaking for anyone in the district, just for myself, but as an educator and among the educational community, the people that I know in education, I can't think of a single person who would say that distance learning is preferable from a purely educational perspective. I don't think there's anyone certainly not that I've ever heard of, who has ever made that decision, that opinion. So what we're really talking about here is balancing physical safety with educational opportunities. But the question that I was going to ask, which actually comes at the same issue, but from the opposite perspective, is in your discussions with the STAR folks and other standardized testing people, has there been any discussion of renorming the tests based on the changes in the educational system that have happened in the last 6 months?
By renorming, do you mean dumbing down?
No, I mean adjusting. I mean, the companies that create these tests do this all the time. Every year or two, they retest and adjust the standardized scores based on where kids actually are.
So we certainly haven't had those conversations with the company, but I can tell you that for us as a district, we set our benchmarks. And we've kept our benchmark high because as of right now, we're still going to be administering RICAS, and we want to ensure that we're not inflating our scores, right? Especially if they're going to be using that exact assessment, because what we have seen is that there is a direct correlation from where students are performing in STAR and how there's a predictor through STAR to predict how they will do in RICAS. And I used that tool often when I was Melville's principal, and we were within points of accuracy for our results of RICAS. So I know it's tough because we want to keep our standards high. And I think that just by looking at it and having the conversations that we just had when we went through this and saying, okay, here's where we were last year. Here's where it looks like we're heading this year. Once we get that winter set of data points, we're going to really be able to tell a story. And then when we start to fold in, okay, who are our distance learners? And then we have to remember there are so many different variables about our distance learners, because we could be seeing scores that are possibly inflated if there's any support going on at home that we're unaware of. I think that's a piece of it. And I think it's the piece of the students, struggling through the assessment. I think that we always have a connectivity issue with any assessments that we're giving students that are online. So all of those pieces will be folded into the work that we're doing. And it's such an unpredictable year. So it's certainly a year to be able to take this data and look at it and be able to sort through it in all different ways and have that flexibility.
Mr. Ferber?
Just a comment to Karen. The norming, I would suspect that it's just too recent a phenomenon for them to norm. I mean, we're in the 9th month of COVID, so I would guess that, it's going to be, hopefully we're not going to be in it too much longer. So I don't know if they'll ever do norming, but I would guess that that's a problem.
Well, I mean, they do that every few years.
Yeah.
The business they're in, so. It'll be interesting to see whether
It will be.
whether there's visible effect.
So I have a couple of questions. First of all, I would really hope that we do not lower our standards. I don't think we do parents, kids, anybody a service by just saying, oh, it's a tough year. It used to be this to be at grade level, now it's this. I mean, that I don't think that helps anybody in the long run. Far better to know you've got a gap and you've got to work on closing that gap than to sort of say, well, we're just going to lower the standard. So I hope we don't do that.
No, we haven't.
So you said urgent intervention, you want the target to be 5% or less, right? So what about intervention and on watch? Are there also targets for those?
So not as many targets. So it's not as specific as that you want to see your district population as a whole to not have more than 5% of students in urgent intervention. So we haven't, if you look at our data points, we have set our proficiency at 60%. So if students reach that mark, they're considered at or above proficient. After that point, we haven't really readjusted our others because again, we want to continue to hold our standards high. So with that urgent intervention, that's been our real focus point. We want to work on those students, getting them into the green and getting them out of the red as quick as we can.
So, so this 60%, is that equivalent to a Massachusetts proficient?
I would have to look at each of the school districts because every school district actually sets their marks a little differently. So, for example,
I think when we
first
looked at it a few years ago, that's
it was
that's
comparable.
pretty much on par with like the high performing districts in Massachusetts.
And to tell a little bit of STAR's story, we started as a district at 40%. That's where we had set our benchmark. And then we realized that what was happening was we had these real inflated scores. And then we received our ICAS and they were nowhere close to each other. So we slowly increased it. We went to 50% and then to 60%. Now, in the next few years, if we really wanted to get down to the nitty gritty of this, every grade level and every assessment at every grade level actually could very well have a different set and a different benchmark of proficiency. And after having a conversation last year with a representative from STAR, that's really the direction that we need to start moving in. And that's the direction that a lot of Massachusetts schools have done. So it wouldn't be exact 60. It might be third grade, 60% in the area of mathematics, 65% in the area of reading, and then you go to a different grade and it switches up again.
Okay.
So we just haven't gotten to that.
So then my other question has to do with, I think I'm on slide 3, which is students, let's just take at or above proficiency in reading on fall 2019 and fall 2020. Are we?
Fall of 2019 and
winter 2020.
Winter of 2020.
I think it's saying to me slide 3. So, so when we see these big drops from elementary to middle, from middle to high school, is that because the test is getting harder?
So in my few months in this role, I think that there are a lot of factors, but I think one of the greatest factors is that in the last 6 years, we've done a lot of work with our elementary and middle school around taking just how the assessment supports their teaching and learning. At the high school, we haven't done as comprehensive of a job of being able to have the teachers fully understand how STAR can inform their instruction. I'm hopeful that in the next few months, we start to have those discussions, because that's also why we used to test students up a few more grades, and then we've kind of scaled back this year. And that was because we weren't really using the assessment the way that the assessment is designed to be used. But there are SAT predictors that I just started having conversations with department heads about. And my hope is that we can move into that so that we can find more value in the assessment at those levels. Because when I see that, I know that our students are performing. They're performing well. I think that the assessment is just given, and then it's not looked at again. Whereas at the elementary and middle schools, we're looking at every intervention student. We're developing those intervention plans where we're moving the students and using those progress monitoring tools to be able to support that.
Is there a point person for this at the high school?
Yeah, we actually have a point person now. We have an MTSS coach for academic and behavior at all 4 of the schools.
And they're the kind of the point people. Okay. And I guess my question would be is, I understand why we're looking at the urgent intervention, but I've always felt that it's the on watch group that kind of falls through the cracks. And I really wondering why we don't put as much or more focus on that group, because that is such a significant population size.
Yep. So I can speak to that as well. So that group sometimes indicates the need to readjust the classroom instruction and curriculum as a whole, right? So it speaks more to what the teacher is doing on an everyday basis and trying to push those students within their differentiated groups. We have a limited amount of interventionists, and looking at our population of urgent intervention, it's almost impossible to have 1 or 2 individuals support all of those students. So our classroom teachers, and I applaud them for the job they do with being able to support the students through the instruction that they're having through their differentiated working groups in reading and in math. We work in a workshop model. So after that primary lesson, they're always working with students at their various levels. So we are doing the work, we're just not developing the intervention plans to support that work. The teachers developing almost like a group-based intervention to support the students who are on watch.
Is that what the coaches are doing?
The coaches are supporting the teachers with that work as well. Yep.
Okay. That's very useful. Other questions? No? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's nice to have getting back to sort of the normal.
Right. It feels good.
Looking at achievement and academic issues. So great. Can I have a motion for the approval of school committee minutes, please?
I move for the approval of the school committee meeting minutes of October 13th and the executive session meetings of October 13th.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Unanimous, 6-0. Can I have a motion for the consent agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
Can I have a vote? Call the vote. Unanimous, 6-0, sorry. Okay, business item A, please.
I move for discussion and action on the fiscal year 22 budget timeline.
Second.
Okay. Dr. Kenworthy or Mr. Bureau? I'm not sure who's up for this.
Yep. So we have a number of business items that are going to be finance related, and Mr. Dioro will take the lead certainly, but I'll just kind of open with the first one. Believe it or not, we talk about wanting to return to a sense of normalcy, but this is the time of year where we need to get ready to start the budget process for the next school year or fiscal year, which in this case, you'll hear us start referring to FY or fiscal year 22. So Mr. Dioro has developed a timeline, which we are ready to review with our district leadership, but we always want to take the step of just kind of bringing it forward to the committee first. So Mr. Dioro.
Sure. This should look very familiar to you. We follow a very similar timeline each year. So I won't go through everything, but I'll just hit a couple key points that I think are important. So tomorrow we'll be sharing this with the district leadership team. The budgeting templates will go out on November 9th, which gives them about 5 weeks to turn that around and get it back to us by December 16th. Sometime between November 30th and December 3rd that week, I'd like to pick a date where we typically have a finance subcommittee meeting where we talk about strategy and that type of thing. We won't have budgets to discuss, but we talk about things that are on the horizon for the budget. Between January 5th and January 11th, we'll be meeting with each of the building leaders and the directors to go through their budgets. And we have typically, I think, put out a doodle poll so school committee members can sign up to attend those and participate as well. And we'll do that. January 11th, we have on the calendar a joint pre-budget meeting with the school committee and the town council. Again, we're talking at a very high level. Budgets are not set, but we're talking about issues that headwinds and opportunities. Then I would say down between, we have to pick another date on, I'm proposing January 13th, but we can be flexible for our capital planning subcommittee, which usually comes together and reviews the facilities capital budget and the safety capital budget. And this year we're adding the technology equipment plan to that as well. Assuming we get their approval, then that will come forward to the full school committee. We meet again with the finance subcommittee sometime the week of the 25th of January through the 28th. The finance subcommittee at that point is going to get sort of a preview of what our first roll-up of our budget looks like. We have 3 opportunities to present to the school committee, 3 drafts, February 23rd, March 9th, and March 23rd. On March 23rd, we'll be asking for a final vote to approve a final budget for FY22, which will then, by town charter, is due to the town on March 24th. So we would submit that and then wait for our opportunity to present to the town council sometime in April. As I said, that's very similar to prior years. If there are any questions or if there's any dates that don't look good for anybody, please let me know.
It's very similar from last year, I think.
Yeah.
So it says discussion and action here. Do we actually need to approve this budget timeline?
I think typically you approve it just
Okay.
so that we can say this is the approved budget timeline that we're going forward with.
Gotcha. Seeing no questions, I'll call the vote. All in favor of the budget timeline, raise your hands. Unanimous, 6-0. All right, business B, please.
Discussion and action of a budget transfer. A budget transfer is over $5,000.
Second. Sediro?
Yep, I'll take that one. So we do have a budget transfer policy. Going forward every month, I will be bringing you some budget transfer requests. Obviously, with everything going on now with coronavirus, there'll probably be a need for quite a few of them. But anything over 5,000 needs your approval prior to actually any transfer happening. So this is the one transfer that we have right now that's above $5,000. It's a transfer between a salary account for teachers and other purchased services. It's for a BCBA consultant. And if you remember, that's really contracted RBT supervision. We had budgeted to have somebody on our staff do that. The person with the actual credentials to do that actually took a different position within the district. And we could not fill that with somebody that had the credentials to do the supervision. So we did not fill that position, and this money is just a transfer between salaries and purchase services, $53,200. Any questions?
Well, so you think it's going to cost the same amount?
Yes.
And Dr. Colwell also could fill in any details here, and she works closely with the agency.
So Mrs. Copeland, or Dr. Copeland, what is the question? Because I heard you say, is it the same amount?
I thought that was both a teaching position and a supervisory position. So now we're saying this is all supervisory?
No.
I thought the position that we had was kind of a partial sort of thing.
Well, I think that worked when we had a person trained on staff who could do it, but in this case, and certainly correct me if I'm wrong, we have to have this supervision for the RBTs. Now we have to this is a contracted service.
Yeah, I
now,
get that.
Right?
I
Yeah.
just thought it wasn't a full-time oversight thing.
Well, no, we had a 1.0 position, with half of that time would have been for oversight and half was for, I forget.
That's what I was talking about.
Right.
So we
So-
didn't fill the half of it.
Right, so, this is a half
Yes.
amount, not the full amount. Right?
Correct.
So the
Correct.
full amount would have been 103.
With benefits.
Oh,
Well,
with
with benefits in retirement, yes.
Of the
Okay, I
full-time
was
staff
thinking that
member,
was the
correct.
full account, but this
Yeah,
is a half
this
account.
is-
Okay, no, I
Yep.
have no further questions.
Okay.
Seeing no further questions, all in favor? Unanimous, any opposed? 0, unanimous, 6-0.
I move for discussion and action of the COVID grant fund, MOA.
Second.
I'll take this one as well. So the state decided to support districts with school reopening and COVID costs, that they were going to release $4 million from the state capital fund. There was no application necessary. They released $4 million. They had a formula for allocating that amongst all the districts. I believe, but don't quote me on this, it was related to the number of COVID cases that certain communities were experiencing. And Portsmouth received an allocation of $14,046
Out of 4 million.
out of 4 million.
I'm doing the percentage here. I wanna
Yeah.
see the percentage.
These monies can only be used for certain COVID expenses, which is they're outlined here. Things certainly that we're doing: HVAC, air quality, filtration, electrical plumbing, etc. So, in order to receive the money, all we need is for you to formally accept it, and then before you leave tonight, if you could all sign it, that would be terrific.
What is it? What is it? I can't read that small.
So our Portsmouth percentage of the $4 million is 0.0035.
Well, that's big of them. Yeah.
Oh, personally, I think we should
Better
send it
than
back.
We're used
Send
to
it
it.
back. Tell them they need it more than us.
$14,000 we didn't have before this.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So,
Penny is a
we
penny.
need to approve this and everybody has to sign the grant. So
Yeah,
are
sign.
there any questions? All right, calling the vote, all in favor? Any opposed? Unanimous, 6-0. Thank you, the state of Rhode Island. for
Oh, yeah.
$14,000.
I'll send the governor, thank you.
Yeah, thank the
Well,
governor.
think about it though,
Send her a
the
dozen roses.
HEPA filters cost what, about 500 per classroom?
Probably
Yeah, about that.
Okay, so that's about 28 air filters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Filters for 28 classrooms. That's-
Okay.
Yeah, hey, it's better than nothing.
Exactly.
So I move for discussion and review of the COVID-19 expenditures.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Duro?
Sure. So I have a couple pages here. I know everybody's been asking to see what the COVID opening costs were, and clearly it's a fluid situation, and costs will continue to be incurred. But I think this is a pretty good snapshot in time and probably represents materially what we'll spend for the year. Things could change, but this is probably pretty good. So we have a couple different types of expenditures that we're experiencing. We also have a couple different types of revenue or funds that are being utilized. On the expenditure side, one of the biggest things that we needed to do, obviously, and we've talked about this, was focus on disinfecting and cleaning. And certainly we needed to add some staff. And so we hired 6 custodians, 2 for each of the elementaries, 1 at the middle school and 1 at the high school. Obviously, those middle and high school have a lot more custodians to begin with. So we needed to make sure we added that. Those folks have all been hired, and this is the actual cost for salaries and benefits for those folks. So that's a known number. It does not include any overtime if there is overtime, but this should be the vast majority of it. We also needed to hire some additional support for the nurses in each of the buildings. So there's 1 nurse assistant that's been hired for each of the buildings. And again, this is a known number. Those folks are hired, and we've done the math on that. Other expenditures is basically everything else, and I'll get to a little more detail around that in a second. I have a separate page, but that's everything else related other than salaries and benefits. And then the last thing is, I think you're aware that for transportation purposes, we're doing 2 cleanings per bus per day. There's an outside agency, cleaning agency, that's been contracted by First Student, and they come in and they do a disinfecting of each of the buses in between the runs and then at the end of the day. So it's clean for the first run in the morning. And that'll be about $35,000. From the revenue standpoint, you've probably heard me talk about a couple of these federal grants that we're getting. The first one is the ESSER grant. That is a little over $201,000. But you have to think about that as a replacement for the state aid cut that happened in May and June. So if you remember, in May and June, when this all hit, the state cut all education aid for both May and June. And as part of the revised budget that they passed, they said they were replacing that with these federal grant monies. Unfortunately, the federal grant monies, though, came with a private school proportion. So really, our grant was closer to 240,000, but we really only get a 201. So we lost $30,000 to $40,000 in that kind of swap.
And can I ask a question on that, though?
Yeah.
What they cut was this year's regular allocation. So it's not extra money to battle some of these COVID expenses. This would have just been our regular state aid grant, right? That we no longer get, or do we still get that?
So there's 2 points to that. So this ESSER grant was actually replacing last year's state aid. So they cut state aid in May and June and replaced it with these federal dollars.
Okay,
But it wasn't a one-to-one swap because the state aid was just for Portsmouth, whereas this had to be, a portion of it had to be given to the private schools.
Okay, so it was last year's expenses that weren't covered, but we were able to cover that because we had such savings in other areas. Okay.
Correct. We have the ability to use it to cover last year's expenses, or if we preferred, we could use it for this year's, school reopening costs, which is what we've done. And I think what you were alluding to as well is that in the current fiscal year, we don't have an actual state budget. And so we're actually getting about 91% of last year's state aid. The hope is that at some point they'll pass a state budget and they'll make us whole, but that's a big if. The second grant that came from the federal government was the CRF grant, or the Corona Relief Fund grant, which has been renamed Supplemental Impact Aid grant. This one is this one has to be spent by December 30th, so it doesn't have a long time frame on it, and it's very very specific as to what it can be spent on. Our application, I fully expect that our application, which has been in for a while, we've been going back and forth, will be approved tomorrow. That's $291,000, all related to Corona reopening costs. And of course, the $14,000, which you just approved.
And we've already spent that $291,000, right? I mean, basically.
Well, yes. If you look up above, we've already either spent and or committed to 1.1 million.
Right.
So yes. So those are the state and federal grants. That's $507,000. I know you remember the school committee at the end of last year. You passed a resolution to basically change our policy one time only, so that any surplus we had last year, which we know was driven by the coronavirus school shutdown, that we would take that money, not put it into the capital fund like we normally do, but actually establish what we call a special revenue fund just for coronavirus COVID related costs. And while our audit is not complete, we're at least halfway through that. I feel very confident that we should have somewhere north of about $700,000 in that fund when it's all said and done.
Right.
So that would give us $1.2 million in what I'll call Corona related funding, and 1.1 million in Corona related expenses as of today.
Okay, can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So don't, the wonderful grant that we got for the external Wi-Fi, does that need to go in here because that's COVID related?
I would say no. And the only reason I would say no is because we would not be spending the money probably if we didn't have that grant. So it's not, we weren't already going to spend that as part of our school reopening. And we
Gotcha.
got a grant to do a specific thing, and so we're doing that. But
We
Gotcha.
identify
Okay.
projects outside of it.
Right. Okay.
so again, 6 of one, half dozen of the other is the way I think about it.
Yeah.
If you turn the page, this just gives you a lot more detail of what I referred to as other expenditures. So what I did is I rolled it up by object line. You're used to seeing the object line on the monthly financial statements, and I gave you sort of a description. But you can get a flavor of what we're spending most of our money on. And really, if you go down to the bottom, 57,306 furniture and fixtures, we've spent a lot of money on plexiglass, air purifiers, fans, desks, lunch tables, water bottle filling stations. There's been a lot of activity there. You'll also see that there's been some PPE under medical supplies, some technology equipment, portable PA systems. I won't go through all of it, but you can get a flavor of sort of what we're spending our money on. And there are 3 columns. The first column is basically what we ordered. That's the PO. The second column means we've already paid for it. So we've spent almost $500,000 cash already out of pocket. And we're still waiting either for delivery and or to pay invoices for another $244,000.
But the good news is we're not over budget.
We're not.
No, that's really awesome.
Good.
Questions? Mine's really more of a comment. And I think, when you look at these numbers as, the community will do and I'm sure the town council will as well. I mean, they can be kind of shocking when you think of how much we've had to spend to actually get the schools open and running and meeting the standards. And I'm really glad that we had that cushion. So we, A, don't have to go back to the town, and B, that we were able to do this. But what I find somewhat heartening from all of this is that a lot of these expenses are not one-time throwaways that we won't use when COVID is done, right? I mean, yes, the PPE, hopefully we'll never need that again. But aside from some of the human resources costs, the extra cleaning, I mean, I think if anybody's been inside our elementary schools and seen those lovely new tables, I mean, those will be a nice addition for years to come for the classrooms. I think the air purifiers, even when we're done with COVID, we'll keep those in the classroom, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, the good news here is that I think a lot of this is, congratulations to the district for hopefully, purchasing wisely so that, we can actually get many years out of some of these expenses. It's not just a quick
Definitely tried to
fix
do that.
to try and open up the schools. So thank you for that. Other comments, questions? Okay. We do not have to approve this, I do not believe.
Well, the money's been spent, so we put it on.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
So thank you.
No, we're not spending money. I'm joking. Can I have a motion then to discuss? Oh, I thought we were done. Are we done with another one?
We have E. Right.
E, budget transfers under 5,000.
So this will again be a review. We don't need action, but as Mr. Dira said, according, try to follow the policy. Anything over $5,000, you need your prior approval. So that's when you saw previously. And I just wanted to give an update of the last couple of months of transfers that we've had to do to keep up with these COVID expenses. So I don't know if you want to fill in any details there, Chris.
Sure. Yeah, we didn't know if we should put this under reports and just sort of make you aware of it or not, but the policy says that in between school committee meetings, we can make transfers up to $15,000 as long as there are, no single transfers above 5, but that we report that out to you and let you know what's happened. So that's what this is. So this is from the beginning of the year through last week. These are all the small little transfers, so I'm just making you aware of them. If you have any specific questions, please ask me, but I won't go through them. They're all pretty small.
Yeah, they're pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
I don't see any questions. Thank you very much. I know it's been a whole nother budgeting effort to keep track of all the COVID things, because you're having to separately record all of these so that if we do get reimbursed in the future from COVID expenses, we will have all that documentation there, right?
Right.
Yep. The good news is with the new system, when we're purchasing, we can actually code these as COVID related, and it makes it very easy to report out on it.
Awesome, awesome. All right,
Thanks, Chris.
moving on to the policies. Ms. McDade, do you want to make a motion for this, please?
Sure. I think for letter F, I think we're going to move to table.
Okay, move to table letter F for future. Are you moving to table any other ones?
Yes, as well as letter I, the
Okay.
procedures and bylaws policy, BED.
All right, it only takes one person to move to table, so F and I are off the agenda. So G, can I have a motion to discuss G, please?
I move to discuss reporting board meeting business policy, BEDK. This is the second read of this policy.
So moved.
Second, all right. Do we need to add anything? We've already seen this. Were there any major changes?
There weren't. There were some very minor ones, but nothing substantive really.
Right, and just to let the public know, some of these are just, Dr. Kenworthy, they're just kind of keeping them current, that they have been reviewed, right? They're not
Correct.
really-
We are still in a transition, as we have been for the last few years of, it is helping us to kind of go back and review some of these older policies that have kind of gone a few, number of years without being looked at. But there is a different coding system that we switched to as well. So I believe all of the policies that we're actually discussing tonight are just changes to the new coding system. We take that opportunity to update anything else that needs to be done at that time.
All right, so we don't need to vote on that. And we don't need to do the read because we already did it during the first read, correct? All right, H, please.
All right. I move to discuss the minutes policy, BEDG, and that's the second read as well.
Second, all right. No major changes?
No major changes.
Any questions, comments from the committee? Had a chance to look at those. All right, J, please.
I move to discuss board member professional development opportunities policy, BID.
Second.
All right. Also a second read. This is our required 6 hours. It's on everybody to fulfill that, right? Other comments? Seeing none. All right, it was all past the second read. Now, do we have a third read or is that it?
Third read, typically that's the process that we follow. So that'll be the next school committee meeting, and that's when you will vote to approve.
Okay, so with that, we conclude the business section of the agenda. Prior to adjournment, just a reminder that we will have only one meeting in November, and that will be November 17th. And we will have one meeting in December, and that will be on December 15th. So thank you all for coming. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All right, moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous, 6-0. Thank you, everybody,
Thank you.
and have a good night.